Hi, I'm Katie from the Pilates Lounge. Thank you for joining me. We are moving on to foot function or foot health as part of our discussion topics. Now, each foot has approximately 28 bones, 30 joints, and over 100 muscles, ligaments, and tendons. I say approximately because we are all individuals and that may be a little bit different for each person. If I times that by 2, most of us are standing on 2 feet, then that's a huge amount of support and a huge part of my foundation that my feet play in us as human beings, especially because most of us are walking to get anywhere, right? So over the course of the next few classes, we're going to be discussing and I'm going to be teaching you ways that you can make sure that your feet are always a part of your class. Now, there's so many things that we could talk about with the feet. Some things that I want you to recognize is that because I've got so many different parts of my feet, and because we are standing on our feet, and ultimately that's where our movement comes from, the health of my feet is very important in relation to the rest of my body. And what I mean by that is if I've got something going on in my foot, anywhere in my foot, so whether you've got something going on your big toe, maybe bunions or just soreness or some arthritis in your big toe, maybe you've got some tightness in the arch of your foot, plantar fasciitis, or just general tightness. Maybe you've had something gone wrong with your Achilles tendon, the tendon that grows out of this big bone here and into these bones here. If you've got anything at all going on in your foot, then invariably it ends up affecting the line further up. So you may end up with tight calves, tight hamstrings, tightness is weakness, and most probably if your foot is not functioning well, then you don't have very good glute activation. And you will notice that in every class that we do, we end up doing a lot of glute work, glutes being your butt, but if your feet are not working well, you can do as much muscle activation as you want in your butt. It is not going to end up activating well when you're doing something as simple as walking or running. So the next few classes are really to get you to understand how to get your feet involved in pretty much everything that we do. So I'm going to be specifically cueing from your feet so that you can start to understand that. Now, a little bit of background to the classes that we're going to be doing. Our body works in neurological terms. What I mean by that is that my nerves feed my muscles for my muscles to work, right? So my nerves grow out of my spinal cord and they end up feeding all of my peripherals being my hands and my feet and even my head and face. So if my nerves first grow out of my spinal cord, go all the way down my legs into my feet, what happens is when my foot touches something, there's feedback, say from the earth to my foot. That feedback goes up into my brain. My brain recognizes that and then sends a message back down to my foot to move. That happens like quicker than the flick of a finger, right? But that process is very, very important. So there's a neurological communication or connection from my feet to my brain for my body to move. Now that neurological connection from my feet to my brain also has a lot of little stations up along my body. In particular, the arch of my foot is directly associated with my pelvic floor tone. Now, I know that can be mind-blowing for a lot of us when we're just starting out on this journey of getting to know our anatomy and how our body relates to everything that's happening. But, for example, if you have a high arch, so if you have a look at your foot and you have a very high arch, sometimes that means that you can have a tight pelvic floor or an overactive pelvic floor. So your pelvic floor is switching on at a high tone too much of the time. If you have a flat arch or dropped arches, sometimes you didn't used to have flat arches, but your arches start to flatten out as we get older, or if you have a really serious spinal injury, then your arches may flatten out. Quite often that's an indication that your pelvic floor tone is not strong enough, right? The great thing is, because a lot of people really struggle to connect pelvic floor, because what does that really feel like? We're all quite individual in what we feel. If you can get your foot working well in your Pilates, then your pelvic floor is doing what it needs to do. Now, if that isn't an aha moment for you, because it's much easier for me to activate my foot, I can see my foot, I know what's going on, then what it may be for you to know whether or not your pelvic floor is activating the way that it should, right? So over the next few classes, we're going to be doing a couple of different things, because there's a lot of different types of people out there. We're going to be doing things to release your foot, so that if you do have an overactive pelvic floor, which isn't any better than a lax pelvic floor or an underactive pelvic floor, we're going to do some foot release work to help your pelvic floor find more appropriate tone. And we're going to do some foot activation work for you if you have a weak pelvic floor or laxicity in the fibers of your pelvic floor. So everybody's going to benefit throughout this. I know that for a lot of people, because I do a lot of this foot health stuff for teachers as well as students, a lot of this is a little bit mind-blowing, very eye-opening, which is the reason that I love it so much, because if you can walk away from this whole process with anything, you want to walk away with very good foundation, and that starts right here. So we're going to get into the class now. Today we're going to start with some release work, and then we're going to go on to some activation work. So thank you for joining me with this foot health. I've been so excited to share this information with you. This kind of stuff has been life-changing for me, and life-changing to so many people that I have met over the years when it comes to improving our movement. So let's get started.